Hi, everybody. Welcome to Meet and Eat Together. My name is Melissa Gerson. I am the founder and clinical director of My Three Square, which is a coaching and education platform, and the platform that we're using today for this therapeutic meal that we're having together today with Jenni Schaefer, a very special guest who many of you already know. And we're going to talk to Jenni in just a couple of minutes, but I want to orient you to what to expect from this hour together, maybe even a little more than an hour. Kind of depends on whether people have questions. Today, we really want to encourage questions. I'm going to have a chat box open, which will allow me in real time to see the questions that come up, and we're going to do our best to field a bunch of them throughout, and also at the end of the session together, at the end of the meal together. So I want to just take a moment. If you have any friends, anybody in your life that you think might benefit from this hour, it would be a really great time to tag them or invite them to join us. What we're going to be doing today is having lunch together in a structure that's pretty much identical to the structure of a therapeutic meal in a treatment setting. So first off, hi, Jenni, welcome.
Thank you for having me back.
So nice to see you. We did an episode together, I guess about 2 weeks ago, and it was so enjoyable, and we got such positive feedback that we decided we needed to do it again.
Yeah, I'm so grateful. I love what you're doing. It's super helpful for people.
Thank you, Jenni.
I tuned in yesterday. I loved what you and Melanie Rogers were talking about.
Oh, good. Yeah, it was a much less formal structure, just kind of chatting, but I think there was some value from the conversation. So yeah, if anybody wants to take a look, just go to my3square.com. So it's my3square.com. And if you go to the live tab, you'll be able to see all of the lunches that we've done over the last few weeks. I think this is our 18th live therapeutic meal. So you'll be able to see meals with all different kinds of guests, and a lot of guests in recovery talking about their own recovery experiences. Hi, Jenni. Love you, Mom and Dad. Just FYI, that came in.
On again.
That's so nice.
From you, I get to have lunch with them every once in a while.
You get to have lunch with them. So at any rate, it's kind of a really inspiring and educational and I think stimulating series of roughly hour-long meetings with different people in the field, whether they're people in recovery, people volunteering in different organizations, people heading up different eating disorder focused organizations, therapists, dietitians. So please have a look. And I'm going to try, everyone's saying hi. So it's really kind of nice to feel that people are excited about our time together. So at any rate, I'm going to kind of jump in. The first thing that we do when we sit down to a therapeutic meal is we think about the meal in front of us. And we generally go through to be sure that our meal is balanced and that it's enough to meet our needs. And in an outpatient setting, I work at Columbus Park, which is an outpatient center in New York City. And we do a lot of therapeutic meals, thousands of them since we opened about 12 years ago. So we've kind of zeroed in on an ideal structure, and we actually have our participants bring a meal, because that, instead of preparing it for them, because that gives everybody an opportunity to just keep practicing portioning, selecting a meal, plating the meal, because those are obviously the really critical skills that people in recovery are working to develop. So we give some very basic guidelines. We'll say something along the lines of, please be sure it's balanced. So more specifically, that might mean that you have a carbohydrate component, protein, adequate fat in your meal. You can have a fruit and vegetable, or vegetable if you'd like. But we just want to make sure that the meal has the nutrients that you need for the most part, and also will be satisfying. So my meal today, I'm going to share with you, and I'm a little boring because I feel like I'm doing a lot of these sandwiches, and it's really just because it's been difficult to access food. I feel like I'm constantly going grocery shopping and trying not to go grocery shopping. So, I had bread. I'm using 2 slices of just regular bread, and sadly, I just have cheese on this sandwich. There was no ham or turkey or anything like that today. So I just kind of filled it up with cheese. And I used some honey mustard, so it kind of had a nice taste to it. And then I took a handful of potato chips, and it was much bigger, but I'm very hungry. So I've been noshing on them while I've been preparing. And then I also included a caloric beverage. I have orange juice, and I did that on purpose because I know many folks that we work with tend to have some anxiety about caloric beverages, and maybe certain judgments about them or rules about whether or not you're allowed to have them. And I enjoy orange juice very much. I have it often. And so I figured it really, to me, went really nicely with my meal, which is more on the salty side. So that kind of the fresh orange juice really, well, it's not fresh, but it's, Tropicana, but, it felt like it was a nice balance. And so I selected my meal mainly because of what I had around. I was kind of rushing, so I needed something easy to put together. And I know this is going to be satisfying because obviously I have the starch component, the carbohydrate component. There's fat in the potato chips and in the cheese. The cheese gives me some protein. I used a few slices of cheese. So you can see there's like a half inch, I guess, maybe, yeah, about a half an inch of cheese on there. Um, and and so that was kind of my thinking around the meal. I knew I wanted something more on the salty as opposed to the sweet side. I was okay with having a cooler temperature, not a hot meal today. So that was my thinking behind my meal. Jenny, let's tell us a bit about your meal today.
Great. Well, I have to thank my mom because she's included in my meal. She actually brought me some homemade bread this weekend. She stayed 8 feet away, 6 feet, 8 feet away.
Yeah.
We had a little social distancing meetup, and she delivered me some awesome homemade food. But she made some bread, homemade bread.
Wow.
So I had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and I've been kind of craving lately, like nurturing kind of comfort foods. To me, like peanut butter and jelly kind of takes me back to my childhood. I've been eating like a ton of canned soup. My mom's watching, so I'll just say, if you want to make some homemade soup, Mom, I'll take that next to visit. Because I've been eating so much canned soup. I don't know why. I'm not sick. I haven't been sick. It's just, I know that's something you typically would eat like when you're sick. And for me, it just feels like soothing and warm. Like last night before I went to bed, I had some soup, but I don't have soup today. My side is actually, I have like just some berries. Partially this is because they were gonna go bad if I didn't eat them. So sometimes I eat just because it's functional, but I love berries like this. And before I do, you can also freeze them. Like if I wouldn't have eaten those right now or had chips or something, then I would have just frozen those. So I figured out all kinds of ways to eat during the pandemic. But that's my meal today, and I love peanut butter. There's a special little piece to that story too. For years when I was struggling with anorexia and binging and purging, I had a big trouble binging on peanut butter. So there were like many years of my life that I could not have peanut butter in my house. Like I was afraid of peanut butter, like, because if it was there, I thought I'm going to eat the whole thing because I often would binge on it. So a big achievement and goal in my recovery was to be able to have peanut butter in my house again. And I have peanut butter in my house all the time now. And it's not any kind of trigger at all. Like it's just peanut butter. Food is once again just food, which is such a gift. So I just want to share that for people out there who have certain foods that they're afraid of or feel like you can never have in your house. And for a little bit, I couldn't and I didn't, but I worked with my treatment team to be able to have those foods. And now there's nothing that I cannot have in my house. But
that is so good to hear. I know many people out there have a hard time really envisioning how do you go from a food being frightening, considered off limits, something that you just don't feel safe around. How do you really get from there to a place where it can be in your cabinet and you don't even think about it until it's time to put your lunch together? So one of the things I've enjoyed about this series is just hearing from so many people in solid recovery, sharing stories like that, that food just no longer has that same power.
Yeah. And what's even crazier to me in some ways is, I learned the concept of intuitive eating, kind of eating what you're really craving and eat when you're hungry, and there's no good and bad foods. But something that's interesting to me that I never thought I would say is now I actually crave like fats. So like sometimes I'll just crave peanut butter. I'll often eat a scoop of peanut butter before I go to bed at night if I feel like I'm going to be hungry in the middle of the night or something. So I'll just eat fats all throughout the day because my dietitian taught me a long time ago, you have to have fat to make you feel full. I thought she was crazy. I thought like, why would someone just purposely eat peanut butter, for instance, or cheese? That's my favorite food, by the way, cheese. I eat cheese all the time. But craving fats is something I've noticed, or craving even proteins. Or today I'm actually craving those berries. But I never in my life before would have thought that I would specifically go to the fridge and think, I want to get something fattening here because I don't want to be hungry in an hour, kind of thing.
And you know what I think is, I talked about this yesterday with our guest.
Yeah, I heard you. That's why I was thinking
when
of
you
it.
have food with fat in it, it's satisfying. And so it actually is a good inoculation against food thoughts, because if you eat a meal and it's satisfying most likely because it has adequate fat in it, then you just find when you're at that place where you're more intuitive, you find that you're just not thinking about food until the next time your system needs to be refed.
Right.
So,
I never believed that. So I'm glad you said it. And for people watching, if you don't have that yet and you don't believe it's possible, I get that, because I used to think people like you were maybe what you're saying is true for you, but not for me.
No, it could never be true for me. Yeah, exactly.
But I now know I was wrong. And a lot of times that was my eating disorder talking, and that I called Ed, as you probably know. And Ed was wrong, and you guys were always right. I wish I would have listened to people like you a lot earlier. Wholeheartedly listen.
Somebody just wrote in on the chat, that oftentimes these things are really frightening, but they do it anyway. And maybe I think we're going to address that again today. That is so health reinforcing to know something is a recovery oriented choice that is going to be hard for you. And then when you do it anyway, those are the building blocks to recovery.
Absolutely. I mean, that's so much of early recovery. And I talked to someone about this yesterday on the phone, but eventually the hope too is over time it becomes easy. The things that were most difficult and that seemed impossible become just easy things. Like you said, you don't even think about food till it's time to eat. So yeah, but in the beginning it's so hard and there's no way to skip that part. I used to kind of wait for easy. I would think, well, I'll read about, eating disorders and I'll do this and that, but I didn't have the motivation, which comes to our topic, to really approach the hard part. Mm-hmm. So I would just kind of sit around waiting for my brain to change. And when I was not afraid of food, I was going to eat it. But as you know, we have to face that fear, just like the commenter said. I can't see your comments, by the way, but she can. Yeah. I don't know what your name was, but it's such a great point. Like, you have to go through that fear. And if you're never willing to do that, it never becomes easy.
Yeah.
And it always feels impossible. But the hope is, in the end, like, the difficult just becomes easy. You don't even think about it.
Well, that really feeds, no pun intended, feeds nicely into the next thing I wanted to say, which is, after we check in on the meal, we set an intention for the meal. And the intention is, something you're going to be thinking about or trying out during the hour that you're eating. And so what we can, in line with what you were just saying, if people would like to try this particular skill, I'm going to just tell you a very simple skill. It's called opposite action. And it's basically what I'm saying it is, it's basically what it sounds like. And so it's actually acting in opposition to what you might be feeling. And I'll add on, in service of healing and recovering and moving forward. And the trick to opposite action is doing it all in. So let me give you an example. So today, if you feel apprehensive about approaching your lunch and you've put a meal out that actually meets your meal plan, or it meets your intention for what you were going to have, but you're not certain whether you're going to eat the whole thing, or you might kind of eat very slowly, with that apprehensive feeling, kind of the overarching experience. And so opposite action would be being afraid and absolutely acknowledging and accepting that feeling, and not trying to make that feeling go away. That is not the goal, but you are actually all in, acting in opposition to the urge to avoid or hide or back off. And so using opposite action and completing a balanced meal at lunch today, what that would look like is kind of matching the pacing of Jenni and me. It would mean adjusting your posture to one that is not, timid or fearful, but like where you're actually, your head is up and you're sitting and you are really eating. and you're going to keep a steady pace, and you're acting in opposite to the desire to avoid a back off, you're actually going to complete your meal. And doing things like that build mastery, builds confidence. It's check off the box that you took a recovery oriented step. And honestly, even if you can only do it for a part of this meal, even if you take 5 minutes of the meal and you're acting in opposition, and then you might just need a break from it, then that was a huge success. So no pressure. That doesn't have to be your intention for the meal, but I'm just throwing it out there as an option. So we'd set the intention, then we basically begin eating. What I'm going to do, we're going to try to keep our eating portion within about a 30-minute time period. The reason why is because, and I'm going to set a little ding to go off when we're halfway through. The reason why is that we want to make sure that we have time for life, that we're not, taking too long to be eating our meals. So 30 minutes is what we generally accommodate in a treatment setting. So we're going to do that now. Yes, someone wrote, can viewers match your pacing? I'm hoping that we can keep a split screen. Mark, if you're listening, try to keep the split screen, I hope, but we're going to try to keep our pacing. Jenny, you and I, my intention is that I'm going to talk with my mouth full. I am going to keep the pacing.
Awesome.
And you too, okay?
I already started, so I apologize for that. I'm hungry, so
me too. I'm dying to eat. So we're gonna start eating. Like, look, I'm gonna eat and I'm gonna talk, and so everybody's gonna be fine with that. But please, you can kind of match our pacing if that's something that we're working on. And so, if I don't answer your question, try to send it again, because questions come up pretty quickly, and then sadly they kind of disappear. So I'm going to try to remember them, but don't be bashful to send in another one. But during the meal, we're going to kind of talk about some things. We're going to talk a bit about motivation. Jenny kind of had this great idea, let's talk motivation, because Jenny, I think you've been a lot from your community that, understandably, given our environment and the realities of our life, it's really hard to find motivation and to maintain motivation.
Yeah, I've been talking to a lot of people on the phone lately, and people who have eating disorders, and most of them are struggling right now. And they were struggling before the pandemic, and many of them now are struggling even more. And something that keeps coming up almost in every single phone call, and I've made dozens and dozens of phone calls since this all started, is that people have a particularly difficult time right now with motivation for all kinds of reasons. One is just the obvious of the pandemic has knocked everyone's life upside down. Maybe you had a job and now you can't go, and maybe that was part of your motivation or something to that nature. Maybe I know people who are writers like me, like I'm having trouble writing right now. It's hard to concentrate. So by nature, the pandemic for some people has taken away some of the things that usually maybe inspire them. Even just getting out of your house, going on a trip, whatever it is, going to a library, things that are closed. So just by nature of what's happening, people's motivation has gone down. But also there seems to be this level of kind of hopelessness, like, why do I need to even try this now? Things are so horrible in the world. Why is my recovery even important right now? Right now, I'm just trying not to get COVID. I'm trying not to spread it. I'm trying to follow the rules, and that's my priority. And so there seems to be this people seem to be putting kind of recovery almost after like COVID and the pandemic, which I know anything you put before recovery, you're not going to do well at. Like, recovery has to be first. We have to be nourished and eat in order to even follow these rules, the social distancing.
What does that look like? How do you put your recovery first under the current conditions?
I mean, so I think, it's going to your therapist, even though you don't like virtual therapy. So this has come up a lot. Like, a lot of people are in like virtual IOPs, intensive outpatient programs. That's what IOP stands for. Mm-hmm. And they were going in person and they loved it. They had friends there, groups, and during breaks, you could talk to people, go to the restaurant with people. You actually could talk and see people. But now I know people who are on IOPs. One woman I talked to is on an IOP like 12 hours a day. It's incredible. And so she's just sitting at her computer, literally, when she has a break. I actually talked to her in a break. She can't see people. And people are finding that some people are finding that particularly difficult, not being in the same room. Other people love it because, they're wearing their pajamas or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think like putting recovery first means you go to the IOP anyway, even though you don't feel like maybe it's as helpful as it was in person, or even though you don't like telehealth with your therapist, or even though you think you don't need to see your dietitian because you're trying to save money or whatever. You think, I'm speaking for myself, I used to think I don't need a dietitian. I know what she's going to say. Of course, I wasn't doing it, right? So I needed a dietitian for accountability. So recovery first means we do it anyway. We can always have a million excuses of why we can't do recovery. I don't have childcare. I need to find a job, whatever it is. Those are some things going on right now. But there's always a reason you don't have time to get better, always. But recovery first means you make the time no matter what. And there are real financial problems right now. Some people cannot afford therapy. That means you apply for scholarships online. There are foundations that provide scholarships. You can actually go to my website. It's jennischaefer.com, or lifewithouted.com is easier to spell. Yeah. Under resources, I have a lot of free treatment options. There's even research studies that provide free treatment. There's a ton of online resources right now. Never before have there ever been this many resources for eating disorders online, like exactly what you're doing.
And also, and I just, another thing is there's also guided self-help, which is something to consider.
Oh yeah.
Chris Fairburn has a manual that's a guided self-help manual, overcoming binge eating, which actually is a very appropriate manual for any eating condition. We advise people read it all the time coming into treatment, whether it's anorexia, binge eating, bulimia, and it's wonderful. It's, very psychoeducational. They walk you through steps. They give you like foundational skills for recovery. So right. A guided self-help manual is something that perhaps folks might be able to do in conjunction with some input from a therapist. Maybe if you can't make it as often to the therapist, to use that as a tool, and obviously also working with a medical doctor just to make sure there's medical stability. But yeah. I just wanted to throw that in as well.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And yeah. I mean, the thing is, an eating disorder is a life-threatening illness. It's similar to cancer, right? So if I had leukemia right now, which my dad actually had, both my parents had cancer at the same time. There, about 10 years ago, there was like no question they were going to get their chemo, right? No matter what. And what I'm finding now is when I talk to people on the phone, they're saying, well, I'll start therapy again after this is over. But, if you had a life-threatening cancer, you wouldn't say, oh, well, I'll start my chemotherapy in a few months. Like, no, it's eating away at your life now. And the eating disorder is eating away at your life now. And tragically, I've been in this too long to know that people do die. And I get those phone calls every year, and it breaks my heart. And this is a life-threatening illness. And if you had cancer, you'd find a way to get the treatment. So I just encourage people to use that kind of sense of urgency. Mm-hmm. It is a life-threatening illness. It will kill you. If it doesn't kill your body, it will kill your soul. It will try to, right? Of course, we can recover. That's the hope. But we don't recover if we don't get help. I find isolation is what kills with eating disorders. And motivation, I mean, if we're talking about staying motivated, connection is what helps, I think, the most for me. When I was struggling, I had a group of women who were also struggling. And it was just happened to be a group of all women. We had males occasionally, but for the most part, there was a core group of women. And we had each other's backs, even though we weren't always doing good, right? We weren't perfect at all in any way. But we kept each other motivated and reminded each other of, why are you even trying to recover? We don't recover really just to learn how to eat in a balanced way and love your body. I mean, those are great gifts. That's amazing. But we recover from eating disorders to recover our lives, right? It's about relationships. It's about life goals. It's about a relationship with God. It's about getting out in nature, hobbies, passions, playing this little guitar. That's what recovery is really about. So I try to get people excited about it. And for me, having connection is what would help remind me about this. Why are you in this? Jenni, you need to eat your lunch today because you want to write a book, remember? And if you don't eat your lunch and you don't get better, you can't write that book.
Jenni, someone just wrote in, my eating disorder thrives on isolation.
Yes.
And, I think we have to just mention, like, right now, what we're dealing with this crisis is so isolating for all of us. And so I think part of what I'm hearing from you is, you're kind of giving everybody a little bit of a pep talk and a little bit of tough love also, as in, like, we know there are so many barriers right now, but this is serious. Not only can it be life threatening, but it can be just life sucking.
Oh
And
yeah, always.
essential to get help. And so I think what I'm hearing is, even though we have so many barriers and we're all isolated. I mean, we just have this wall of our devices between one another. We have to do it anyway. We have to find ways of making connection because, what you're saying about connection being such a central part of your recovery. Every single person who's come on this program over the last, I think probably 90% of the participants, the guests on this program, are in their own recovery, and 100% of them mentioned connection as being the primary kind of catalyst to recovery. You being with people, connecting with people in an authentic way, using people for support, essential.
Yeah, essential. And we have to get creative right now. I mean, you're right. There's a lot of ways to connect with the screen. And in fact, I mean, more than ever, there's never been as many online resources for eating disorders as there are right now, where you can actually connect. And right now, I can't see people commenting, but they can talk to you literally with comments. And I think that kind of connection, anytime you can really communicate with someone in some way, whether it's just posting a comment, take a risk and do it. I mean, I encourage you, if you're watching this and you haven't commented yet, I encourage you to post a comment just to do it. And it might be hard. Like I wouldn't want to. I mean, I'm kind of shy on events like this. If I'm watching, like, I just want to sit back and not say anything, but I would encourage you guys.
I'm not going to name names. Like this is totally anonymous.
Oh, but yeah, totally.
And I'm going to take little notes because someone asked another question that we're going to definitely hit.
Oh yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd encourage you guys to either ask a question, especially if you don't want to and you're afraid, or if you can't do that, if you're not up to that phase of like writing out 5 whole words, just say hi, like two letters, and I. And that's an example of like taking little baby steps to recovery. Even just saying hi in a comment is huge. And that's a connection with you and with me and what we can do right now today in this moment. I think I mentioned this in our last talk. I'm trying to get creative. I'm single, quarantined alone here in Austin. No one's in my house but me. So it's just me all the time. But I've been like sitting on my front porch. I call it front porch therapy. And I sit on my front porch and I'll read a book or something. And people are walking a lot in my neighborhood now. And inevitably people say hi to me because my neighborhood's actually way more social now. I'm meeting more neighbors than ever before. And it's because I'm sitting on my front porch. I typically would sit in my backyard, which is this way. If I'm looking this way, it's because I'm looking at trees and birds that are making noises. But typically I would hang out back there where no one can see me. The only time in my life I've ever sit on my front porch is during this pandemic. And I love it because I'm meeting people.
It's just like an open door.
Yeah, I can connect, and be in the presence of someone without being near them. So I'm still following the rules, but I'm actually in the presence of a live human. And I think that is very important. And in my recovery, oftentimes, calling someone for help was helpful. We didn't really have text back then. That would have been helpful. But what I found more helpful than anything was always meeting in person. Face to face, no matter what, if I could. And you can't always, but if I was struggling with, say, binging on that peanut butter I was talking about earlier, I called someone in my group and tried to meet with them for lunch, because left to my own devices, left with Ed, because again, back then I was alone too. It was just me and Ed in the house, right? My eating disorder, Ed and I. But now at least Ed's not here. But it's just me.
Oh my goodness. Good riddance, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about motivation and, some other ways that people can, if they're feeling kind of, down and alone right now, and it's hard to access that kind of internal drive to do something different. What thoughts do you have about mustering it up? And I have a couple of ideas also in my head that we can share today.
Yeah, well, one story that's helped a lot of people, and I actually wrote about it in my last book, Almost Anorexic, which is about subclinical eating disorders, subclinical bulimia, binge eating disorder, or anorexia, any of them. But I had a woman Facebook me once, Amanda Olson, and she said, Jenny, I finally found a dream big enough to beat Ed. And she was in middle school at the time. And her dream was to go to Japan and study. And at the time, she was struggling with an eating disorder. There was no way she was going to do that. And she was in deep with her eating disorder at that point. But there was a voice in her head that said, you know what? if we turn things around, if we work really hard, I can make that. I want to go to Japan so bad and study. I want that more than any promises the eating disorder can give me.
Mm-hmm.
So the cool news is she ended up graduating from high school, and she went to study in Japan. And that was her dream, big enough to beat Ed. And I thought about that in my own life. I recovered because I had a dream bigger than Ed. And for me, you know, this is not a book commercial, but I have another book here. My book, Life Without Ed. This book saved my life. I wrote this book and I turned it into my publisher. And once you turn a book in, the final draft, there's about 9 months to birth the book till it's out on the shelves at bookstores. When I turned that book in, I had a big relapse. And that was kind of the time where it was, you know, I had to do it or not do it. You know, I knew I had 9 months before this book showed up on bookshelves, and I wanted to be authentic and be able to stand behind it and say, I am in recovery. And during that 9 months, I worked so hard. My dream to publish this book kind of pushed me above all the promises that the eating disorder had for me. And it helped too to have a deadline. I mean, for me, and keep in mind, I had been in recovery many years at this point. Like, I had been in treatment many years. This was not year 1 or year 2 or even year 3. This was, I knew what to do, but I wasn't doing it. I wasn't willing to do the hard part. And so for me, having something beyond, goals beyond just the food. I think right now we can be so overwhelmed with what's going on in our world. Just having goals that are like, I want to eat lunch today. Well, that's great. But like, what else do you want to do today? What can you do one thing today to have fun, even if it's not going to be fun at first? You know, you don't have to write a book, but what can we do to build our life? We recover from Ed to get a life, not just so we can eat and do stuff like this. You know, we recover really to move on. And so that's my inspiration. I want to say never give up too, because I have something else to show kind of interesting. These are all rejection letters for my first book, Life Without Ed.
Oh, wow.
And I have more. Back then they used like stamps. If you're young, this is like a stamp. It was like an email, but in the actual mail. And I got rejected so many times. The only reason I got a book deal is because I knew from my eating disorder recovery that you fall down 7 times and you stand up 8. And I kept standing only because I had been through an eating disorder. And I knew that if I could get to even the amount of recovery I was when I turned the book in, if I could do that, I could do anything. Because recovery is so hard. But so that's just inspiration for people. You know, it was not easy. It's fall down 7 times, stand up 8, my favorite Japanese proverb. I would encourage people to just think beyond the eating disorder. In early recovery, I was so focused on food and body image and but what can I do to look beyond that? What do I want in life? Do I want to get married, have kids, like go to Paris, whatever it is? Be a therapist. So many people want to be therapists, by the way.
Yes. I mean, I think that's so, you know, I think what you're talking about is connecting with your values, connecting with what feels important to you, what can drive you. And you might not really know right now what that is, but you know, this may now be an opportunity to try to start thinking about that. And even small things like, you know, so for example, you know, all I know is that when I'm around animals, I feel good. I love being around animals. So then, you know, what could that build in your life? You know, how can you create more opportunity to have feel good moments where you're with animals? Because feel good moments then begin to build. The more and more feel good moments you have, then suddenly you have a life that's worth living, right?
Oh yeah, that's so great.
You know, another thing, because I see people writing in a couple of things, and one of the things I'm picking up on, one person referenced an administrative discharge from a treatment center before they felt ready, before they were ready to leave, which was very discouraging, and it felt very rejecting. And I think what that really is a big setback, right? And a setback can be whether you're not getting your needs met in a program, you're being discharged prematurely, or a setback could be a relationship struggle, or losing your job, or a setback can be a relapse or a lapse or a hard moment. And I think those are the moments where it can be hardest to find motivation. You know, I think we all can relate to how, I realize I'm talking and I think you don't even see my head. I'm trying to show my plate, but then I'm trying to get my head in. So, you know, I think when it's really dark and you're feeling so lost, you know, those are the really hard times to find that motivation. And one other person wrote in something that I think is so smart, which is, you know, motivation will come and go, and you have to do it anyway. So in those dark moments, is there any way to connect to something which is, I want a life. I want a good life. I want peace in my life. And so, what is one small thing I can do in this moment to find it again? And, one of the skills that I wanted to teach today is building mastery. And building mastery is any small thing where you show yourself the ability to kind of almost conquer something or gain control of something. And honestly, it can be as little as making your bed, in the morning. I noticed in the pandemic that helps me. Mulaney yesterday, my guest yesterday, was talking about this too. When I feel like a loss of control or things are out of order, I do know that when I clean or when I make a bed or when I feel a little bit better.
I make my bed because of you guys, by the way, yesterday and today. And it does make me feel better. I've been doing it way more.
It's a moment of mastery. You got to.
That was the connection, like knowing that was, you guys felt that too. And I did. It was cool to know, like, I know all you guys, Mulaney and you, and it was like, oh, we're all making our bed together. And even though we're not together, it just felt like a unified team action.
Honestly, every time, everybody out there, next time you make your bed, I mean, most people have beds. And, next time you make your bed, think about this recovery moment and that you're building mastery. You're creating order out of the chaos of your bed. You're putting your bed together and you're starting your day, and that you're going to try to create other moments of mastery in the day. And whether that's completing one meal in the day that's on your meal plan, or all meals in the day on your meal plan, whether that mastery is having a binge and then recovering by eating the next meal and getting back on track. I mean, those are mastery moments, and write them down. Anytime you experience mastery, we all need to appreciate moments of mastery and write it down. Keep a log of your mastery moments. Even, whether it's making your bed or getting your shower in the morning, or you're brushing your teeth, or, small things, big things. And if you're using the other skill, which is opposite action that we talked about, you might wake up out of bed and just not feel up to making your bed, but you put your posture together, you stand up straight, you get your arms out, you make your bed,
Right. You do it anyway. I mean, be willing to do whatever it takes is a little recovery motto I had that I try to use in life too. You got to be willing to do whatever it takes. And even when you don't feel like it, which is a lot, and especially in early recovery. But I love what you said, the question about, the setback. The word setback is interesting. By definition, setback means that some progress was made, that you've been set back from, you made progress and you're back. But so by definition, that word means I did it once. It means I can do it again, right? It's not an all or none term, like, oh, I have a setback, I'm never going to get better. It's, I had a setback, I did it once, I'll do it again. And that was really helpful for me to reframe relapses.
Let's not call it a setback. Let's call it a get back.
Ooh, I like that.
Right? You might have had a moment, but like, get back. A moment, a slip is a learning moment. I mean, any recovery process that doesn't have those little slip ups,
right,
is really worried and skeptical, because I know that those slips are that defines like a healthy recovery. You're learning from each and every one, and you're getting back. Every setback is a get back opportunity.
Yeah, I love that. And also what you said about keeping notes of what you master, I really love that. And that's something I used to do, like in the moment when I felt like I couldn't do it and I was losing motivation, is I would read something, I called it a time travel letter to myself. But essentially, in a moment when I was doing good and actually doing well, I would write a letter about how it felt to master some things, right? Like, I'm doing good in recovery right now. And recovery really is possible, Jenni. It was a letter to myself from a place when I was doing really well. And I could read it in the future when I had a get back or a setback.
I love that.
So I called it like my time travel relapse letter. I think it's an exercise in Life Without Ed, but it was real. I mean, it was a letter from me to me, because so I could believe it, right? It wasn't like someone out there was saying,
yeah, those were your words.
So I would encourage people, next time you feel strong and like you had a good moment or a moment of mastery, sit down and write about it, write how that feels, and write a letter to yourself in the future to encourage yourself at that future person who's going to struggle, because they will. And recovery is possible. You can get better from eating disorders, but life is always going to throw us hurdles, right? So that's the technique. You can use that in your life,
And I think it's worth noting, because people who struggle with eating disorders are often very perfectionistic and demanding of themselves. And so I want to reiterate that the way mastery works is it has to start with small things. It has to start with brushing your teeth in the morning or making the bed or whatever, whatever little small step. Because again, let's say you make your bed in the morning and you brush your teeth at night. Well, then there are 2 moments of mastery in the day. So I just wanted to reiterate that there's no step too small.
No, I love that. And I really appreciated what Mulaney, you guys talked about yesterday too, about Mulaney said, there's so many blogs right now. People are like, the amazing things you can do in the pandemic, during your quarantine, write a book or, do this. And I love how Mulaney said, you can just do nothing, get out of bed and brush your teeth and make your bed. You've done well. There's all these blogs and things saying there's these high expectations for your quarantine. Create a masterful artwork during the quarantine or something. And that's just too much pressure right now,
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think you have to find what's going to work for you. And just as, we were talking yesterday about how everyone's saying, get on this schedule or that schedule. If you're doing homeschooling, you got to kind of think about what works for you. I just want to get back. So we have about 5 minutes left of the eating portion. I'm done with my meal, but I think
still working on it. Tell my mom that her bread is very good. Thank you, Mom.
Oh my goodness. I'll let you know. I'm sure she's going to say thank you. Someone sent in a question that was a good one. What about logging food? And we were talking about logging mastery moments. What about logging food? And I don't know what your take is on food logging, food and drink logging, Jenny. I know at Columbus Park, we use that strategy often. It's kind of the foundation of CBT for eating disorders. We use a particular form of CBT that was developed for initially for bulimia, but then expanded transdiagnostically. So it's a treatment for anorexia, bulimia, binge eating disorder. And it's really the leading outpatient treatment for eating disorders. There's a pretty robust bunch of literature showing that it's really quite effective. And at the foundation, there is that logging component because, the idea is that if you want to change a behavior, the only way to really do that is by actually getting the data and being able to see the data in front of you. And then ideally with your provider or independently, really analyzing that data to see, what's setting you off and what are the factors that are keeping you locked in. So, we do the logging and not in a really super precise way where we suggest measurements of food or anything like that, because I think that goes in sort of a not so great direction, not so helpful direction, but very, very generally, I ate a peanut butter sandwich, or, I had a glass of juice. We wouldn't say how many ounces. I don't think that's the point. You can log in, I felt bingy, or I felt, this was a subjective binge, or this was an objective amount of food that I think was more, from my perspective, feels like more than one might normally eat in the same time frame. But trying not to get too specific, but really allowing yourself to be able to look at your patterns so that you can change elements of your pattern that aren't working for you. I don't know if you've done much logging in your recovery process.
Yeah. Early on, I mean, I definitely did it. I had a piece of paper. My dietitian gave me a trifold, and I was supposed to fill it out every week. And most of the times, I didn't fill it out at all. That was perfectionism. I was afraid to fill it out because it wasn't perfect, and I wasn't doing what she said. But finally, I was willing to put it down, even though it wasn't perfect or anywhere near perfect. And that really did help, I think, most of all with patterns and with accountability. It felt good just to say, I ate that peanut butter sandwich and write it down.
Yeah.
There's something for me about actually holding a pen. There's a little bit of research on that, like the act of, full actual pen. But I know now there's a cool app, Recovery Record. I don't know if you guys use that, but people.
Jenna is the CEO, the founder of Recovery Record. She came on.
Oh, yeah, you guys have
last week. So
yeah, you guys should check out the video you guys did, because Recovery Record's a great app. Now people can take pictures of their plate and send it to their dietitian or therapist. And a lot of people use it. It seems super helpful. But for me, really being willing to be honest and imperfect was key. One of my most helpful exercises was when my therapist asked me to write down what I binged on. My dietitian wanted to know too, but I would just write on that piece of paper, binge.
Yeah. Yeah.
But my treatment team kept saying, I want to know what you binge on. Like,
yes.
what is it? Like, write a list, not specific measurements, but like, I want to see. And I was so ashamed, like that, like no one's ever seen a binge as big as mine. And there was so much shame attached to binging for me that I could write the word binge, but there was no way I was going to write it down. And for years, my therapist kept trying to get me to do it. And finally I did it, one day. And I hid under a blanket on the couch in his office when he read it. That's how ashamed I was. Like, and I just I say that to normalize it. I mean, so many people struggling with binging. It's a natural behavior after restricting. That's what it came about for me often. And I had to realize this is an illness. This is not something I chose. Like, I feel the shame, but also realize there's nothing really to be ashamed of. Yeah. Like, this is a normal part of having an eating disorder. And sharing that, I think Brene Brown, I think she says, what is it? Empathy and is like the antidote to shame. Something like that. If I'm wrong, comment, because I know there's Brene Brown people out there, but that really being vulnerable, and with my therapist showing empathy and him saying, like, I've seen this before, this is nothing that I haven't seen, really helped me. So just sharing a binge literally took years for me to do. Wow. But it was a key component.
And it's interesting on the other side as a therapist, because when I read someone's binge, I mean, I don't even think twice about it. You know, any therapist that works with eating disorder, we've seen everything. We are so desensitized to it, you know? So it's really, you know, I think in the mind of the client, it's just like, you're thinking all of these judgments about yourself and imagining that your provider is going to have all these judgments. And it's the last thing from the provider's mind. The provider is just thinking, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that this client shared this with me. Because I know how meaningful that is. I know that is often, you know, sometimes I'll even push someone to share because I know it's just there. It's almost like before sharing and after sharing. There's like a PS and a AS, you know, before sharing, it's like you're holding it, you're ashamed, and then after sharing, it's like letting something go. Right. And then it's also an opportunity to be able to really then look at the behavior and change those behaviors that, you know, that aren't working for you anymore. So a lot of people are kind of writing about different methods of recording logs. So I think people out there have, I'm getting the sense have had positive experiences with logging and have found logging to be generally helpful. Some folks don't like it. They, you know, oftentimes if someone says, you know, I think it makes me more food focused, I'll usually ask them to kind of hang in there a little bit, because that's usually at the beginning of logging that can happen. And then with a little bit more experience, it tends to get a bit easier. Someone asked a question, and I'm kind of getting where this question might come from, but I'm not even sure exactly how to answer it. Someone asked about, you know, is there a meal plan template that I can get, or how can I get a meal plan? And I think that reflects a longing for structure, or a longing to be, in a way, kind of given some guidance of what to do, because in your depth of an eating disorder, you're really feeling so lost. You just, the feeling is like, how on earth does one eat? You know, where do I even start? Yet I'd be very reluctant to put together a meal plan for all, you know, it's so individual. And I don't know if you have thoughts about how you want to respond to that question.
Yeah, you know, I've been getting this question a lot, and I'm not a professional, and again, everybody's body's different. Everybody needs something different. So I always encourage people, you know, seek out a dietitian, an eating disorder dietitian. And there's actually a credential, I think it's certified eating disorder. Was it CEDRD? Certified eating disorder.
Yeah.
And that means that someone's gone through a significant amount of training, but in general, make sure a dietitian actually treats eating disorders. Because if they don't, I've heard sometimes they can prescribe diets, which of course we don't prescribe an eating disorder. So I would say for sure, don't go online and find some diet or something masquerading as a lifestyle change. There's a lot of times these days diets say they're lifestyle changes, but they're really just diets and they don't work. So I would say don't find what you're going to eat by going on
Go
to some
online. Yeah.
weight loss online thing, because that's what I see, unfortunately, a lot of people do. And that can actually trigger the eating disorder, make it worse. But I think you need a dietitian, even if money's a hurdle. There's virtual dietitians now that sometimes cost a little bit less, and there's a lot now. But even if you can just see a dietitian once or twice, a few times would be super helpful. And I would encourage you to do whatever you can. And right now, most dietitians are virtual. And so even if you live in an area where you can't find an eating disorder dietitian, right now you can find them online. There's a lot of great ones.
Yeah. Yeah. I also think it's worth saying, sometimes in the midst of an eating disorder, there's this idea like, I want to be told what to do. It's easier if I could be told what to do. And also maybe a fantasy that there's some kind of miraculous meal plan, that if given this meal plan, everything is going to come together. And I don't think it's so much like that. I think that though, early on, when you have an eating disorder early in the process, it really does take someone, whether it's a dietitian or a therapist, or maybe even a peer mentor in some cases, to kind of help you begin to tune into your own intuition.
Yeah.
And perhaps even reflect on times of your life where you were healthy, where you did not have disordered thoughts, and to try to remember back to those times. Reflect, was this truly a balanced period of my life, or was it not? But to kind of reflect on what did your eating look like when it was more intuitive, when it was more in touch with hunger and fullness.
Yeah. And something that helped me, I had a friend in recovery with me, but she was farther along than me.
Yeah.
We would often eat lunch together, and I would often just see, what is Emily eating? Because I knew she was following her meal plan. I knew that she ate in a balanced way. And so I would literally copy her. And that's something I've heard a tip. Like, if you know someone in your life, like, who you believe eats in a balanced, kind of intuitive way, try to look and see what they're doing. That's not going to be
cool idea.
That's not necessarily what your body needs, but it's a nice way to start to get a sense of what normal might look like. Because in early recovery, I mean, I had no idea what normal looked like anymore.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good idea. And as you're looking at somebody's eating, to ask yourself, do you find that person's eating appealing because it matches some kind of a judgment or template in your head that might be more in the eating disorder box?
That's a great one. I was gonna
or are you really kind of in your wise mind? Are you in the part of your mind where you're really very reasonable and not so emotion based, but more like the steady part of yourself connecting with, to really say, is this person appealing? They're eating appealing because I think it's so clean or right, or is it appealing because this person looks free? They don't look like they're caged by their food. Food doesn't seem to have a lot of power for them. They seem to be responsive to hunger and fullness.
Yeah.
To kind of ask those questions. But I think that's a great idea.
I mean, is it Ed that likes what they're eating, or is it me that likes what they're eating?
Yeah, exactly. And that's sometimes not the easiest thing to parse out.
No.
A little bit on a different subject, but someone had sent in ahead of time a question about severe and enduring anorexia, to asking a question about treatment for that, and whether there's hope for someone who maybe, and this I think goes for not just anorexia, but for any condition, anyone who's been through a lot already, maybe has not found treatment to be helpful, or has had some help in treatment, but then has managed to kind of fall off again. But I guess specifically for severe enduring anorexia, the question was, is there hope for me? And I just wanted to say, well, first off, in the research, there are treatments for every condition and every level of condition. So yes, there is definitely hope for you. Severe and enduring anorexia, a lot of people don't know about specialist supportive clinical management, which is, maybe a more recent development in treatment. And it's a treatment that was designed really for long-standing anorexia, for anorexia that's been kind of resistant to treatment, more kind of mainstream treatment. And the way that specialist supportive clinical management goes, it's often abbreviated SSCM, is that actually weight restoration is not the primary focus right from the start. Instead, the focus is on really improving quality of life. Mm-hmm. And to that end, without question, invariably eating is addressed and food is addressed and overall health are addressed. But I think in a way that's considered a little less threatening to someone who maybe has been in the anorexia mindset for a long time. And it's a safe treatment, and that there's a medical provider that's involved. And one of the really core foundational principles of SSCM is that the patient has to maintain medical stability. And that's kind of the deal from the beginning. The treatment is really going to be based on your desires and your needs, with the understanding that you have to maintain medical stability. If you don't, then we have to address the medical instability immediately, in the hopes to get you back into the treatment. So SSCM is definitely something to explore and see if there are folks around the country in your area that might be trained in the intervention.
Yeah. And also, I know so many people who had severe and enduring anorexia nervosa were sometimes told by providers, they were their hope was snatched for some of these folks. Like they were even told, this is chronic. But I know so many people who are recovered and they were told they were chronic. They were told they were not going to get better, that they were too old. I know people who got better in their 70s, 60s. And I think we used to not have as good of research, but several years ago, Dr. Cameron Eddy at Harvard Medical School came out with a 20-year longitudinal study with eating disorders. And what we saw was we weren't following people long enough. Some people that we thought weren't getting better, they really were. It just took a lot longer. And that doesn't mean everybody's going to take 20 years to get better, but there's a lot of hope in getting better. And I've seen people who were never going to recover, and they are recovered at all ages. But there is always hope. Always.
Yeah, no question. No question that recovery is possible. We see it all the time. So
all the time.
And I think oftentimes, the truth is, I think sometimes that belief that recovery is not possible can almost be relieving, because I think it takes some pressure off at times in your recovery process when you're not feeling as motivated. And it can be a way to sort of not lean into treatment, but instead, sort of think, well, I guess I have to live with this condition.
Right.
So I can understand how that can function for some folks, but unfortunately, it's kind of that idea, that belief that recovery can't be possible, unfortunately, keeps you pretty stuck. So,
yeah. And that makes me think of something I've been wanting to talk about, because it relates a lot to motivation. I know we're running out of time, but thinking about what the eating disorder does for you. So, or not having hope, what does that give you? And one of the most pivotal exercises my therapist had me do was he looked at his hands and he said, these are the parts of the eating disorder you don't like. You don't like binging. You don't like that it makes you depressed or isolated. But what do you like that it's giving you? It made me feel special, control. And my therapist said, this is the eating disorder. It's this. And he said, Jenni, for years you've been doing this. Like, you've been spending years in recovery trying to separate the eating disorder. Keep which was this my good hand or the bad? I always forget.
That was your good hand. That was your good. Yeah.
I need to make it more consistent. But my good hand, I was trying to keep these, but get rid of these. I was like, you can take these, but I just want to keep just a little bit of restricting, or just a little bit of this. And my dietitian taught me, leaving one little ember, even just a little pinky of eating disorder in your life, that's an ember that's waiting to be a raging fire again. And recovery was a grieving process. To be motivated, I had to realize it's a process where I have to let go of these things. And until I was willing to do that, I was never going to get better. I had to be willing to grieve these things and find other ways to feel special and have control, and those there's ways. I'm not special because I had an eating disorder, but it used to fuel that kind of thing.
Yeah, it can often feel that way. Yeah.
So I just encourage people to think about today.
Love that.
Make a list. I had once on a piece of paper, like front side, what the eating disorder does for me, back side, what I hate about it, and try to figure out where's the negotiating going on. Because often we're negotiating like, I want to get rid of this, but not these. And that keeps us stuck. And to get out of it, we have to look at that and realize what are we holding on to, and what does it give us? Why? Maybe it gives us an out. We don't have to go to school. We don't have to get a job. We don't have to get married and get a partner, have kids if we're sick. Being sick gives you an out, right? I mean, I used that for a while. So it can be like there's some hidden things the eating disorder might give us. And we're all different. It's different for everyone, but that was just a really helpful exercise for me.
I love that exercise. I could even see writing it on your hand, writing it on your fingers and just taking a moment and really looking at your hand.
Oh, I love that.
And really reflecting on, which hand is it going to be? And I think what I'm hearing you say is that as hard as it is, you really kind of have to choose a hand.
Right.
Because I would argue, someone wrote that's so true. I'm like totally having a moment where I'm so connecting with what you're saying, because as long as you're accepting the parts of the eating disorder that you like, and as long as those are a part of your life, like you're not going to have a full life. It's
Yeah.
just not, it's not going to happen.
No.
And so you really have to choose a hand, and it might take a little time to, separate them, but
Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting way to look at it. The way my therapist said it was like, essentially he's like, this is the eating disorder. It's the bad and the good. And essentially you got to get rid of all of it. Like,
oh, I see.
he wanted you to like, look at it, like you said, right on your hand, look at it. But in the end, like, stop trying to separate it. He said I was like spinning my wheels trying to hold on to what I wanted. He said the eating disorder is one. To get better, you get rid of all of it. The stuff you don't like and the stuff you like. That's just that's how he described it to me.
I love that. I was thinking, the things that don't work about your eating disorder and the things that you do. And so the things that you don't, the idea is that you would go, choose those things,
Totally.
choose the things you want for your, so I can see how you,
either way, I mean, whatever works for people.
Whatever works for you, but I can see,
leave the rest and always put your own spin on things. But that really was helpful to me.
Yeah.
To see like, what am I holding on to? Because that's why I stayed stuck for so long. I just wasn't quite ready to like get rid of all of it.
Yeah. You have such a wet way with words. And so obviously
I love your show. I've been tuning in.
Thank you. But
TV or something.
I want to take a moment to just, I kind of lost track of the time a little bit. So I'm really sorry about that. If that might have felt unsettling for some folks, because managing the time, and then I realized it went off. And then, so, we didn't really stick to our time frame. So we're going to like allow some compassion with that process. Okay. But, I was able to complete my meal. I feel we usually, after we complete the meal, we usually kind of check in. How are we feeling physically? How are we feeling emotionally? I'm feeling like excited emotionally, especially after that hand thing. I kind of got like perked up. So I was definitely, eating my meal, but not thinking so much about my food, because I was thinking about everything else, which was really kind of nice. Because I think, especially if you're in an eating disorder, not thinking about your food while you're eating is probably a really good thing. I feel really comfortably full. I definitely want more orange juice. I needed a bigger glass, but otherwise my meal was good. I mean, the sandwich was fine. Like, it served its purpose, but it's another one of those examples of how, sometimes the meal is just not that great, but you kind of do it anyway, and you feel better. And, it's like that flexibility of, sometimes meals are going to be amazing and delicious and satisfying, and other times they're just going to kind of suit the purpose. So my sandwich was okay. My chips were great. My juice was great. And so we kind of go through that together, and people can share a little something about their meals. But then what we really try to do is just wrap it up. We want to just wrap ourselves up and try not to open up too much emotion. Actually, we want to cope. We want to be effective. We want to move on from the meal into our lives. We don't want the meal sitting with us afterwards. And so, so I'm going to throw out another kind of motivational concept and skill. And I think something that I really like at the end of the meal to offer up to people, and it's called coping ahead. I've talked about coping ahead before on this program. We talk about it all the time at Columbus Park. But the idea is actually that what you're doing, and especially if you're feeling really unmotivated, coping ahead is coping ahead because something difficult is coming up.
Yeah.
And like, whatever it is in your mind that's going to be challenging, we want to assume it's going to be challenging. And so we're going to assume, just for example, that after this lunch, it's going to be a hard afternoon. We might have thoughts about the meal. We might be, dreading something we have to do. We might feel lonely. Lots of things can come up. So let's just assume it's going to be really, really bad. And so what we do in coping ahead is we kind of imagine ourselves dealing with all of those challenges effectively. So
I love that.
Mind, imagining, it's called imaginal rehearsal. And what they say actually about imaginal rehearsal is it activates the same neural pathways as actual behavioral rehearsal.
Yeah.
So a lot of athletes do it. Tennis players, a tennis player can only practice their actual serve so many times without, ending up with an overuse injury or getting tendonitis. There's only so many times physically that they can practice the serve. But so coaches are really advising athletes, performers to visualize themselves doing the serve in the way that they want to, really doing it well. And so with coping ahead, we plan out we imagine how we're going to do in the difficult afternoon ahead. And we picture ourselves doing it well, doing it with whatever well means to you. So if that means you imagine yourself diving into your work after this without thinking about your food, I want you to imagine that. Really see yourself doing it. Imagine what your thoughts are going to be. What are you going to be doing with your hands? If you imagine yourself having your afternoon snack and your dinner and your nighttime snack today, imagine it. Imagine feeling the worst you felt in a long time and how you are going to overcome those moments. Just think it. And what we really do find is this, it takes a little practice, but coping ahead, after every meal, many of our patients just say, okay, I'm going to work on my cope ahead plan. And then they go through it in their minds and they imagine it. And, even that takes some motivation to do it, to imagine in your head, but it doesn't maybe take as much as it takes to actually do something. So just try to imagine it in your head. Try to see yourself mastering the afternoon. See yourself mastering one point in the afternoon. Envision yourself, using our other opposite action skill, bumping, puffing up your chest and putting your head up and like going into the afternoon and doing your work and eating your snack. So
I love that. You have so many great life tips. I mean, they're just great for everybody. I wish you could create like a little app and like kind of be in our heads or something. And throughout the day, you're like, cope ahead.
Oh. Well, again, I mean, these videos, they're totally free. They're on our My Three Square website. There are tons of them now. And every single one has a skill. It has a tip. It takes you through lunch. So they're completely there. There's a library. You can access them whenever you want. And and so
I love that you're doing this. Thank you. It's so amazing.
Jenni. And it was so good to see you again, as always, and to be able to relate with your community a bit. And they're writing really lovely.
Yeah, thank you guys for coming on. I wish normally I can see their comments and I say hi to them, but I'm going to go on after this and see who was on. But
yeah, I think some of them are on Facebook. So they're on different platforms.
Cool.
And so.
Well, and if you guys this weekend, if I'm doing a cool event, Sandra Kronberg, a dietitian in New York, is doing a cool morning series on the weekends. On this Sunday morning, I believe it's at 10 o'clock Central, 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. It's a free event, a Zoom event, like an hour chat. It's called like a coffee chat, morningside coffee. So get some coffee, and it's on my website, just lifewithouted.com, and go to the about and then calendar. But it's a free event too. You just have to sign up ahead of time. But that's been a really cool weekly event, and it goes on till September. So I love that you guys are creating these weekly events for people to create structure,
Yeah, to have a little bit of structure. And it sounds like your website is a wealth of resources.
I'm trying to get a lot of the events going on, the free events that are online. And are you doing one tomorrow or the rest of this week?
We have another one tomorrow. Tomorrow we have, no, I'm sorry. We have one on Thursday. Marissa Sapo is going to come on. She's from another local New York City treatment center. And we're going to be talking about shame and compassion.
Ooh, that'll be
kind of interesting. And then on Monday we have Jessica Damasi, and I found her online. She has a really big following, and she has like really inspirational messages about like freedom and liberating ourselves from shoulds and shouldn't. So, and I think she can be a little off color sometimes. So that'll be kind of fun. Like, I don't think she's afraid to curse, and she's a strong voice for like breaking free. So I think that should be a lot of fun.
I actually had a funny tidbit. I had in therapy for my eating disorder 10 years ago or more, 15, my therapist spent a whole session teaching me how to say a cuss word. He wanted me to practice breaking rules. And I literally had a megaphone. He had to break this one syllable word down. I can't even say it now, but and he was like, start with like the first letter, just say that.
Oh my gosh.
I paid someone to learn how to cuss.
Yeah, that's so adorable. I mean, as always, you're so authentic, Jenni, and just your heart just comes out, and in your energy and your guidance, and you really dedicated your life. You've dedicated your life to helping people, and that's amazing.
And that helps me. And I mean, I guess maybe leave motivation. I mean, my motivation to keep in life is always, helping people helps me. People are always grateful for stuff like that you're doing, but I'm sure you're getting a lot out of this too, right? And so it's like the 12th step in the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous or Eating Disorders Anonymous, but pass it on. And that kept me motivated too, like trying to help others it
Yeah.
really just helps ourselves. But I feel so blessed that for a job, I get to eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches.
I
It's
know,
like
right?
a job.
Amazing.
And chat
So,
with people like you. So thank you.
so good
You're
to see you, and
very
thank you for
helpful.
joining us.
Yeah,
And
great.
we'll be
Sure
in
thing.
touch soon.
Yeah. Stay safe.